everybody. It's Niche and welcome back to another episode of Laughing and Crying. How you been? Happy holidays and such. Have you been rating the podcast? Have you been leaving a review if it's necessary? Listen, we all know people don't like doing stuff unless somebody else has already done it. Okay, unless somebody else already supports it. Okay, it's true. I don't buy anything on Amazon without a review, and this is no different. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I promise you will help somebody else make a decision to click play. Plus, I love reading what you guys think, so just don't forget to do that. Another thing, join the Patreon. There'll be brand new content starting in January or kind of wrapping up the end of this year, slowing things down, trying to get my head focused for where the show is going to go next year. But I'm excited for everyone who has joined the Patreon. It's been fun. And it's just been a really cool thing to hear more from you guys. Rather than just Instagram, just have a community over there. Coming up on the podcast, we'll be doing another segment of Let Me Tell You a Story. I have a story for you guys. And then later on the episode, I'm going to have a conversation about 10 things that I've learned over the course of 2022 and just some things that, in my mind about what stood out to me from hosting. So, yeah. It's going to be exciting. And we're going to kind of recap on some of the things that we talked about. So it's going to be kind of cool. Okay. So the story that I have for you guys today is funny because I was going back and forth in my mind about two different stories. I was like, I kind of want to make it Christmassy. So I kind of decided to talk about the story from a Christmas that I spent in Pennsylvania. I was at a ski resort. I'm just going to tell this one because I'm dying laughing. Okay, so I was at a ski resort, and I was with one of my friends from college, and okay, I gotta do this without laughing. Okay, so the story I have for you is that I was spending Christmas at a ski resort, and I was with one of my friends from college, and we decided to just take a job. We took a job up there just for the season. We wanted to have access to snowboarding and skiing and just have a whole different experience that we probably were never going to get to have again in life. So we did that. And we were kind of okay, we're in this together. We're going to do this together. I cannot tell the story without laughing. Anyway, so me and my friend were always clowning each other. And so he would do something, say something to me. I'll be like, what'd you say? Whatever. We would fake push each other, all this kind of stuff, right? I can't do this. Anyway, we'd fake push each other, whatever. So, this was perfect. We were we're going to go to the ski resort. We're going to do this thing. We travel up there. We get there. We end up meeting a couple new people. We get settled in. And I don't know if it was the first night I was there or it could have been the first night. I don't know if it was the first week I was there or I don't remember. I think we had gone into town because we were literally on a ski resort. So in order to get to a Walmart or any type of store where we could get anything we needed, we had to go down these long windy roads down the mountain. It was super scary. Only one of the people that we knew had a car because we flew, of course. And so I think we had just gotten back from one of these trips. And so me and my friend are clowning each other, just making jokes, whatever. So he decides that it's a good idea. And if any of you guys know me, you realize very quickly this was a bad idea. But he decides, I cannot put my finger on it, so I'm honestly just gonna kind of tell it how I remember it. I kind of remember either he pushed me down into the snow, because there was snow, and it was cold. He either got the idea to push me down into the snow when I wasn't paying attention, or he took snow and put it down my shirt, the inside of my jacket and my shirt. And just theater of the mind, or if you've never been in a cold place with snow, normally you have on a couple layers, right? So you have on maybe a long john, maybe a shirt, then you have on a scarf and then a jacket. Okay. He put it down to where the snow was on my skin. If this is how I remember it, he put the snow down my shirt. Okay, and so my immediate reaction was like, "What in the world?" After I freak out, so I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna kill you!" Right? Like, so I'm like so mad because I was already cold. We were about to go into where we were staying, and he freaks out because he knows that like I was about to get him. So he freaks out, gets his key out, opens the door, and there's this like long hallway to where we were staying, and we had like separate rooms or whatever. We were staying on, like a hotel or whatever. We were staying in something similar to that, but there was this long hallway. And so in this long hallway, it's important to note that okay, bear in mind, if you picture a long hallway, wood paneling, and there was some sort of pipe that dropped down the wall, but instead of it was being inside the wall, for some reason it had to like jut out. So it was a part of the wall that kind of like jutted out that you had to be I mean, this was like old housing, okay? So you had to be very intentional about like walking around this part of the wall that jutted out. And we like essentially like we always remembered that. But he gets so freaked out because he knows like he messed up, right? He knows like he went too far. So I was like, I'm gonna get you. And I just literally, I don't think he expected me to like just like take off after him. So he gets his key, opens the door, is about to head down this hallway, turns around, is looking at me, and I'm like, oh no. He runs smack dead into this part of the wall that juts out. And I'm like, I am still picturing it because I remember it. He is like, those one of those things from movies where you see somebody like turn around and there's something in front of them and you're like, turn around. Like literally that's how it was. Like I almost in that moment, like all of the anger that I had just like dissipated just to like warn him not to run to this wall. But it was like way too late. And he's like laughing. He has like a cynical type laugh going on. Like, ha ha ha, got you. I'm about to escape. I jetted off towards him. So he like booked it into this place. So he's running like full force into this wall. And all you hear is like, boom. And I thought that this man broke something in his face. It's only funny now because it's been so many years and he's fine. But like literally immediately turns around, his like lip is like 3 times the size that it was. I'm pretty sure immediately. If it wasn't, it was like the next morning he was like, not ever coming out of my room, not going to work, I don't care, whatever. And I see him and he's like, you're gonna laugh. He's like, you're gonna laugh. I'm not. You're like, I don't care. I'm staying in my room. And the first time I saw him, I swear to God, like I tried my hardest not to pee in my pants and it wasn't because I was laughing at him. It was like one of those things where it's like, when you see something, like when you see somebody fall, even like when you know that they're okay, like clearly he wasn't like okay, but he was like okay. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't die, right? So when you see something that funny, it's like you can't help but like replay it in your head. Like this event just kept replaying in my head like over and over and over again. And it was hilarious. And so when I saw him, it just reminded me of it. And I just always wanted to laugh. And I felt bad because I knew I couldn't laugh because of what he was going through. But it was stinking hilarious. And I had to try not to pee. And then as the weeks went on, as it was like healing, I felt even worse because I was like, this is not going away quickly. I promise. But the thing that made it funny is that he started it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't start something and not finish it. Like, bruh, you started it. And to this day, you started it. OMG. OMG. Anyway, that's my story. I don't know why all of my stories are either people getting hurt or me getting hurt or people falling, but there you go. Okay? There you go. So, moving on. I just need to take another minute. I mean, when I tell you his lip was the size of a baseball, like, Like, part of me was like, are you okay? You know what I mean? I really shouldn't post this. I really should not include this in any of my podcasts, but it's happening. Okay, so moving on. Moving on to the conversation, I told you guys that I was going to talk about the 10 things that I learned from hosting this podcast this year and just from kind of diving headfirst into even the idea of doing a podcast this year. It has been crazy. So let's just jump in, right? Number one, speaking of, one of the things that I've learned from hosting this podcast this year is I have way more stories of incredibly ridiculous things that have happened to me than I even could have fathomed. Like, I hope you guys are enjoying those, especially the one I just told. Merry Christmas, because that was his Christmas that he spent with a busted nose or a busted lip. So yeah, there's that. I am incredibly grateful that the stories of my life have been able to bless people and make them laugh. I think that was the biggest thing about this podcast when I started it was I didn't want it to be a podcast that just talked about all the boring and hard stuff that went on with the relationships, but I also wanted to make it fun and make it funny and make it a good time because that's kind of what I'm about. So I was just really happy that I was able to do that, even if it was just through story time, you know. So appreciate you guys from listening to my stories and laughing at me as I laugh at myself and all of that. Okay, and number two, what I learned is if you have something that you want to do, do it. Kind of piggybacks off what I said just a minute ago about the stories. Is that we're coming to the end of the calendar year of a podcast that I told myself for many, many years I was not going to do because no one would listen. And now I'm hearing people say, man, I love your stories. They make me laugh. The way that you talk about relationships is the way that I never would have thought that would interest me, or I would have never learned this, or I would have never paid attention. And I lied to myself for many years saying, like, nobody's going to listen to me. I'm not, like, what I'm saying is not important enough. And just don't lie to yourself like I did. Get started, stick your feet in the water, or just jump fully in on whatever the idea is that you have because it's important and it's needed. And I'm excited for whatever you're going to do. I'm excited for year 2023 of what I'm already doing. And I'm glad that I get to look back on 2022 and say, man, I have a whole half of a calendar year of making a podcast when I told myself that I would never do it because it would never catch on. So that's pretty dope. And then number three is even piggybacking off of that one. They're kind of all rolling into one, or rolling off of each other, is that people actually do listen to my podcast. Like, I think that the instant gratification that most people want from something like this, I've learned does not come the way that we want it. I've learned that none of this stuff, none of the things that we want, we see these people who are Insta famous and who, you know, get on TikTok or Instagram and then all of a sudden they have millions of followers. What I've also learned from that is even some of the people who have millions of followers, they're not making money from that. Someone clicking on a like is nothing compared to someone actually latching on and saying that they've learned something and that they've grown, or they've been, or they feel like they're a part of something. And I really, really appreciate the people this calendar year. I know there will be more next calendar year, but the people that this calendar year of doing this podcast who've literally told me, my relationships have changed. I've thought of things differently. I've grown. I've learned. My marriage will be better. All from the little humble things that I thought that I was saying that no one would ever listen to. Like, people listen to it. And I just want to say that out loud, not to brag on myself or be boastful, but I want to say it because I want you to be encouraged that just because things aren't happening as fast as you want them to, just because you're putting in a lot of work and not seeing the results that you want to, doesn't mean that you don't have something to offer this world, and only you can do whatever that idea is in the way that only you can do it. And so there are some people who are fashioned just to hear things from you. So if it's starting a podcast, if it's starting a business, if it's starting, I don't know, you know what I mean, a YouTube channel, or wanting to be a social media influencer, whatever it is, there is only one person who can do it like you, and that's you. And there are people who are only going to want to see or hear or learn from just you. So just take that to heart a little bit more. Don't let it roll off your back, and just let it sink in that whatever you're doing, just because somebody else is doing it, or just because you think that somebody else won't be entertained by it or won't learn anything from it, it doesn't mean that that's true. I think it's valid to feel like you're not as valuable as someone else, but I don't think that that makes it true. Okay, big thing that I learned. Four. Number four is something I learned is that I started out thinking that there was this huge distinct difference between how we better ourselves in romantic relationships and how we better ourselves and heal in platonic ones. And I just realized that's all a fallacy. Relationships are relationships. I think there are things that we are more inclined to sacrifice depending on how much effort and and the type of things that we're getting from said relationship. But what I believe in its entirety is that these principles that I've learned, even hosting my own podcast and just doing the study and the research and all the things that I've done throughout the time that I've had this podcast, is that these principles work on every relationship, whether it be your parents, whether it be your children, whether it be your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whether it be your friend, whether it be your coworker. Like, some of these principles will work regardless of the relationship, because we all need the same types of things from others to feel heard and accepted and valued. And moving on to number five, everyone who I thought had relationships figured out doesn't. Like, just straight up doesn't. I've done interview after interview for months after months, and I keep coming to the same conclusion after every interview. And it's that everyone's still trying to figure it out. And I don't mean that as a dig on anyone. I think that it's actually relieving, and it brings a sort of peace about everything that I've talked about, because somehow I see myself, and this could be my imposter syndrome that I talked about in one of my episodes, Imposters Among Us, that for some reason I feel like everyone is doing better than me. Everyone knows more than me. And so when I think about this, I always thought about, like, hey, I'm the one that's kind of learning how to do relationships and just sharing my knowledge. But the reality is everyone's still learning, and everyone's just kind of eyes closed in the dark, feeling and figuring it out. So I think that's just, it could be something super negative if you let it be. But I think mostly it's something that's super comforting if you let it be. That you're not the only one just trying to figure it out. And you're not the only one just trying to figure out how to heal from broken relationships, or trying to make things right with relationships that you've broken, or just trying to figure out how you fit. You know, you're not the only one. Okay, number six. This is the biggest lesson from this podcast that I've learned. And that is that validation is one of the number one keys to communication and relationship. And without it, you will not survive long. If you're looking at, or if you're listening to this right now and saying, what is validation? What are you talking about? I need you to go and listen to the episode validating what we don't understand. I need you to go listen to that episode validating what we don't understand, because man, that episode changed my entire life. And I think there was a lot of things that I was just skipping over and missing. And I just learned that, man, validation is one of the keys to making somebody feel accepted, believed, understood, heard, seen. And man, if you want to screw up a relationship, just keep invalidating people. It'll push people away quickly, I'm telling you. So if you need help with that, by any means, if you need support there, I'm telling you, go over to that episode, listen to Validating What We Don't Understand. I'm not going to go into depth here, because that's not necessarily what this episode is about, but I'm telling you, it will change your life. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, is that as long as I am telling people I believe you when they tell me what they feel, as long as I am fully listening, not because I want to be right, but because I want to see that person in front of me, then my relationships will stand to have more value and stronger foundations. So that's great. Number 7, ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions can play a huge role in how you present and what impression you leave on the relationship you're in. And learning how to cope with that is so pertinent. It's extremely pertinent. It's so important. Learning just to cope with whatever you're dealing with. And I say neurodivergent conditions because it's not all ADHD. Some of it is, I don't know, anxiety. Some of it is other things that people are diagnosed with that I'm not aware of at the moment. And I'm not going to try to pretend like I am. But there are things that if you went to go see a therapist, someone who's licensed and trained, and they told you, hey, I think you struggle with this or that, dealing with those conditions is not an option when you want to have healthy relationships. Whatever it may be, whatever has affected depression, anxiety, ADHD, the list goes on. Autism, it's okay that you live with, I have ADHD, so it's okay that you live with those things, but it's not okay to let someone in your life take the brunt of the negative impact of that condition because you don't want to cope or you don't want to get help or you refuse to acknowledge it. That's not fair. And you could be hurting or damaging someone in your life because you don't, want to acknowledge that. And so I just encourage you because that's hard. Like taking that step to acknowledge something like that is super hard and difficult. But what I've learned hosting this podcast is that if you don't, sometimes you unintentionally cause more damage than you would have wanted to intentionally. So I'm the poster child for wanting to run away from scary situations, but this is one of those ones that you kind of want to run into the fire and sit away from it, so that you can put it out, so that your relationships can be a reflection of the work that you're doing in yourself, Number 8. Remember this episode about family? That was a long episode because, wow, families can be screwed up. But one of the things that I learned from that episode is we can't change our family, but it's best to understand our family of origin dynamics so that we can be intentional about how we present and we can be intentional about our future relationships so that we're not like repeating bad habits or unwanted behaviors just because it's normal for us, just because this is what our family did. There are so many relationships that become broken or damaged because we don't want to address our family of origin. It kind of piggybacks off of what I just said about the neurodivergent conditions that we don't want to face. And I believe that the family of origin situations are very similar. So if your whole family grew up just avoiding everything and you don't want to address that and you want to, avoid it, you're going to cause damage in your relationships. If your family grew up cussing each other out and you're like, well, I'm supposed to be allowed to cuss somebody out and they're just supposed to understand that this is who I am, well, maybe we need to understand something else, Or if you're like, oh, all of my family was always sarcastic and you're not going to survive being married to me if you can't deal with sarcasm. Well, we learned in the validation episode that, at least I think I talked about that. If I didn't, I'm talking about it now. Okay. But I learned from Brene Brown that the origin of the word sarcasm is from a German word that means to tear flesh. So if you're telling someone, hey, you should allow me to tear your flesh because that's what I grew up doing. And if you don't, you're the problem. Okay? Like if you can look at it that way, you know what I mean? Like looking at it as my family of origin is no one else's problem but mine. And I get to decide how I move forward. I get to decide what lives, what dies. I get to decide what I carry on, what traditions I let live, what traditions I want to die, what traditions I want to, shine light on and put up on a pedestal, which ones I want to bring down the size. And I get to decide that. But if you're not even acknowledging that your family has a huge impact on who you are today, you're never going to be able to make those decisions, and you will negatively impact your relationship. So let's not do that. Let's look at it, and if you're not qualified because maybe you think your family's perfect and you think because of that you're a byproduct, of perfection, like maybe let's get a therapist. You know what I mean? Just to double check. Like, just to double check on that one, because none of us are perfect. Come on, and so, that's great. And I know I'm talking about the what's, like, the what, like, validate and talk about feeling of origin and cope, but the why is, like, because we all want to have healthy relationship, right? Like, the why is that we want to be in a healthy relationship with other people, and we want to heal. And some of these things are to, give someone a great experience of being in a relationship with us, but then the other half of that is just to be someone who does relationships really well, and be someone who promotes healing and health in the relationships that we offer to other people. So the why is just, to look at what do you desire from the relationships that you have and the relationships that you want to have, and work backwards from there. Number 9, the thing that I've learned from hosting this podcast is pointing fingers in relationships does nothing but delay the inevitable. And it kind of builds off of what I was saying about, what do you want? Do you want torn relationships? Do you want healthy ones? Because a lot of people, they sit around and say, hey, I have all these torn relationships. It's all these people's fault. These are all the reasons why people didn't stay. People weren't happy. And the reality is, like, I'm not saying it couldn't be some of that, but it's not all of that, right? So pointing fingers in relationship does nothing but delay, the inevitable, which is, you will eventually point and push people away. We play an important role in the success and the failure of our relationships. Let me say that again. We play an important role in the success and the failure of our relationships, and we have to be willing to acknowledge that. I know everyone wants to jump to the caveat case or to the outlier scenario, but the reality is, in the majority of the run-of-the-mill relationships we have in our life, we carry responsibility of the failure of it. And some of that is what I was saying, of just, like, simply acknowledging that there are things that we still have to work on. And I'm saying this just as much to myself as I'm saying it to you. So please don't take this as, like, me coming down on you or saying that you're not doing enough. It's just that I understand that, one of the huge thing, learning validation, is, like, I've seen leaps and bounds of better responses from our relationships just from that episode alone. So pointing fingers doesn't help anything. All it does is give you an excuse and a reason not to change. And so here on the Laughing and Crying podcast, we're going to laugh about it, but we're going to change, okay? If you're rolling with me, if you know me, we're going to change, we're going to challenge. And I appreciate that about my audience. I appreciate that about you guys out in podcast land, is that you're willing to be challenged and you're willing to change, because you my people. You are my people. I love it. Okay, last thing, this is a funny one, but I'm going to keep it in here. Zodiacs be true. Number 10, Zodiacs be true. Okay, a lot of people have talked about this last episode that I did with the Zodiacs, that I'm so appreciative that people took that well and received it well. But a lot of people have talked about the Zodiac episode and how it affirmed the things that they felt about themselves, or affirmed the things that they've experienced with other people. And I just think, although it's definitely not Bible, I just really, really think that it's just another layer of things that we can do to learn about ourselves, to, yes, laugh at ourselves, and to be like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How can I present better in life? Because the reality is, there may be a bunch of relationships that you don't give a darn about, but there will be one that you do. And all of this work will help that relationship, along with all the rest of relationships you have in your life, right? Oh, wow. That was a mouthful, but that was also 10. I promised you 10. I gave you 10. Okay. Of all the things, I kind of want to know how you feel. And I also want to know what is something that you've learned from listening to my podcast. Head over to my Instagram, DM me, whatever you got to do, get it to me because I don't know. It just makes me feel good to hear that you legit learned something from all the things and all the topics and all the interviews that I've had over this past calendar year. And I'm just really excited to hear from you. If you're my Patreon, you know how to do it. Just write on the wall. We talked about it all, guys, okay? And like I said, go over to Instagram, DM me, and do all the things because I want to hear from you. Make sure you also, while you're over on Instagram, check out my reels, like them, engage with me. I just want to hear from you in general to get new people to listen to the podcast. And I don't know, because life needs a little laughter. Oh, you can always join the Patreon. That's at patreon.com/Unleashthaneesh. That's Unleash, THA, niche. And Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. I don't know. I think it's so crazy that it's Christmas. And as we are visiting our families this year, these are all things that you can keep in mind to keep your head above water, to not getting unnecessary arguments with, aunts and cousins and brothers and sisters that you haven't seen for a couple of months, or this is your first time seeing them in a couple of years. Just keep it in mind. Keep these things in mind. Revisit an old episode. Christmas time, holidays are hard for a lot of people. And I know that there are loved ones lost. I know that there are relationships that maybe you can't get back, maybe you can't fix. And that sucks, guys. I'm just going to leave it there because there's nothing more to say than that really does suck. And you're not forgotten. I hope you feel acknowledged just by that statement. For the relationships that still are in your life, for the relationships that still are present, I hope that you find some comfort in knowing that you have some tools now in your back pocket to be able to use with those relationships in order to get them to a healthy place, or at least strive to get them to a healthier place. I love you. Merry Christmas. Thank you for being my podcast audience for 2022. Happy New Year. I hope to see you in the new year. I hope that you're still subscribed. I hope that you still listen. And I'll be back. You know what I mean? And maybe when I'm back, we can impact the world or something. I don't know. I'll leave you with that. Bye.